Hello again. Another very short video here. Just a couple of things to tie up on our discussion on inventory. So first off, want to talk about why do we have inventory? What are the functions? So we've learned all these different formulas that we use to manage our inventory, but why is this important? So one of the big functions is decoupling the production process from the purchasing process. So we don't, in order to respond to our customers' needs, we don't want the customer to have to wait for us to order something for it to come in. Right? Customers are very demanding; they want it right now. That allows us to respond to and anticipate the customer's desires, to have that product on hand, to better service their needs, and to compete against our competitors who have maybe less inventory, and that allows us to have a higher service level. All right. Another one is quantity discounts. So just like we talked about in MRP, sometimes you are required to, or it's advantageous to order in certain quantities, case quantities, pallet quantities, truckload quantities, etc. So we'll want to use our inventory to take advantage of that. Obviously, the flip side of that coin is the inventory costs, right? And that's why we look at EOQ, okay? And then to hedge against inflation. So we buy inventory now. If you remember from your accounting classes, FIFO versus LIFO, right? So we buy inventory now in the hopes that it is less expensive to purchase it now than it is to purchase it in the future. This is very common, like in steel futures, buying inventory now or buying futures on inventory, betting that the cost is going to go up long term. All right, next we're going to talk briefly about the types of inventory. We start off with raw material, and if you want to think about baking bread, flour is cheap, right? And then work in progress. As we put labor, as we put overhead into our products, the more time it spends in our facility, the more labor we spend manipulating that, baking the bread, mixing the batter, whatever you're going to do with your flour, it becomes more and more expensive. So raw material is cheap. Work in progress is not yet ready to sell, but we're doing something with it to prepare it for sale. And then we get finished goods, often called FG, and this is the product awaiting shipment, awaiting purchase. This is the fully baked loaf of bread on the shelf, ready to go. And then we have MRO. MRO is a separate class. It's another type of inventory, but it's separate from what we think of in traditional inventory. So MRO, maintenance, repair, and operating, are all of those things we need that we're not selling to our customer. So raw material, we intend to sell to the customer. WIP, we intend to sell to the customer. Finished goods, we intend to sell to the customer. But MRO, we do not. So these are all the things that we need to help keep the facility running. If you think about currently, the big things are things like rubber gloves, right? The N95 masks that are in the news. We don't intend for the consumer to purchase things like that. We don't intend for the consumer to purchase things like shop rags, paper towels, equipment lubricants, cleaning supplies, sanitizers, dish soap, all that kind of stuff that we use to process things in our facility, but those are necessary. So we need to also manage our MRO inventory. All right, next concept I want to talk about, ABC analysis. So this, we're breaking our inventory down into 3 classes. I have seen more than 3 classes. I've seen D class. I've seen companies try to do Z classes. It's really not worth it. Maybe you can justify a D class. But your class A, this is your high annual dollar volume. This is the vital few, and class C is the trivial many. So we're trying to identify which are the most important items that we have in our inventory. So we would graph it like this. So our A items, you can see we have very few items, right? So we have somewhere around 10 to 20% of our items, but that accounts for 60 to 80% of our sales. Versus our C items are at the opposite end of the spectrum. This is our deep inventory. This is the long tail, it's sometimes called. So these are all the items that we have to have on hand to keep the customer happy, but this is not something that we're going to keep a lot of. We're generally willing to accept a lower service level on our C items, but our A items, these are the things we absolutely cannot run out of. I'm sure those of you who have worked in retail can think about your top sellers, right? Your A items are your top sellers, and your C items are the slow movers. Your B items are somewhere in between, all right? And ABC is the common way. It's like I said, I've seen much more in-depth ones, but you can also just do an A and a B or an A and a C and just have the most important ones and the others. So this is an example of what this might look like. So we have our item number, the percent of the items stocked, and in this example there are only 10 items, so each accounts for 10%. We take our annual volume times our cost, then we get our total annual dollar volume, and then we calculate out the percent, and then we break down class. So let me show you an example here. Let me pull a sheet in. So I'm going to run through how this might look in Excel. So for this one, we have our part number, our annual sales, our cost per unit. So I'm going to calculate dollar volume. Dollar volume is simply one times the other, right? Annual sales times cost per unit. We can autofill that down, right? We can go ahead and we can take a sum of that. Go over to home, auto sum, and now we know this is our dollar volume. Let's go ahead and throw the dollar signs in there. Then percent dollar volume is going to be equals this one divided by our sum, F4, autofill down, right? And we can look here. We have numerical count of 19 items. Let me pull that up for a second because I see that's off the screen. So when I click on this, you can see here I've got numerical count turned on as 19. So each one is just a little less than 5%. We can worry about that one in a little bit here. But what you're going to do with this is we're going to go to data, filter, and I want to filter this. I want to sort from largest to smallest. All right, and then I can figure out my number of items. So if I have 100 divided by 19 items, each one is 5.25. So each of these is 526%, right? That's the total number of items. Let me convert that to a percent. I did that wrong. 0.0526. There we go. All right. So I can take a look here, and let me split my screen. There we go. All right, so what I'm looking for is 60 to 80% of that value are my A items. So if I go down here, and again, let me bring this up here. Should have made my recording screen a little bit bigger for this one. So I have, if I turn on all of my functions down here, I'm getting a sum. So we see the sum of those. So if I'm shooting between 60 and 80, okay, that's 59, and maybe that's a little low. 71, okay, 78. But what you want to look for here, and there's a little bit of judgment in this, right? So these are general ranges. These are all pretty significant chunks, and then it kind of drops off. Okay, so I'm going to say that these are, and I'll color code according to the other slide over there. Let's make that a little lighter. I'm going to say that these are my A movers. So my class for these is going to be A. All right, so those are my A movers. And then I'm looking for the next 20 to 40%. So again, if I highlight, if I'm watching down here, so we could say this one, we could even go a little bit further until we see kind of that drop off. Let's highlight these, and we will say that is going to be 24. So I can class these all. I can class those all as B, and then let's sum these, and we can move the decimal. We can see there's more than none there. So if we add these up, sum is 5.59. I would say that's pretty fair. Where you run into some minor disagreements here is really between the line between B's and C's is a lot of times really fuzzy, and between A's and B's there's a little bit of judgment call there. Okay, so then we can do a quick sum if. So if you haven't used sum if before, my range. So I'm going to do my range here. Oh, actually, I take that back. This is my range, and my criteria I'm going to say is this, and I'll drop an A, B, and C in there. So I'm looking for sum if this column equals this cell, then I'm going to sum my percent. So I'm going to put A, B, and C in there. I can drag that down, and there you can see that I have a total dollar volume of 70% of my sales, 23% of my sales, and 5.59. And then I can do the same thing. I can equal sum if, and again, same range, same criteria, and now my sum range. And you can see, let me zoom in here a little bit. You can see that I'm within what I would expect here. So I'm looking for Class A, 10 to 20% of my items, and 60 to 80% of my value. So we're just a little bit above that, not that big of a deal. We're looking for 20 to 40% of the value. We're within that. Number of items, 20 to 40%. We're within that. And then 5 to 15, we're within that. And 50 to 60. So I want you to understand that there is a lot of managerial decision here on what is an A versus a B versus a C mover. But these are the general guidelines that we would follow. We would be looking for generally this range. You might see other ranges. You'll see some places publish hard numbers that this has to be 70, this has to be 15, but this is generally accepted. All right. And the last thing I wanted to show you here is this is kind of a breakdown of what holding costs might be as a percent of your total inventory value. So you've got we talked about some of these, and these are in slightly different categories, but this is just an example I wanted to show you. You're not going to be expected to know any of this, just kind of an FYI. That's all I've got for this video. I hope everyone's doing well. Let me know what questions you have. Have a great day.